Indians living in America are starting to flex their political muscle. A growing number of Indian Americans are jumping into races for U.S. Congress that begin in late March. That's next month. There's a lot at stake. The elections could either provide much more support for President Donald Trump or much more opposition to him and his policies. And WION correspondent Andy Roskin found out that Indian Americans do not have just one voice when it comes to politics.
There are 535 members of the U.S. Congress. Only 5 are Indian Americans, which is actually a record high. And all of them, like Representative Raja Krishnamurthy of suburban Chicago, are members of the more liberal Democratic Party. But all that may be changing. At least 14 Indian Americans are now running for U.S. Congress this year. They are a mix of both Republicans and Democrats. And they are proving that, in many ways, Indian Americans are just as divided as the rest of the country.
I do think that the Indian American community, like others, is not monolithic. It's going to have a diversity of viewpoints, a diversity of political affiliations, and so forth. And I welcome that.
In Krishnamurthy's district, northwest of downtown Chicago, there are not one but 2 Republican Indian Americans challenging him for his seat. One is Republican Jatindra Digna Walker, an Indian-born businessman, and the other is Republican Vandana Jingan, who is the candidate from the Republican Hindu Coalition, or RHC. The RHC, founded by businessman Shalabh Kumar in 2015, is a fierce supporter of President Donald Trump and takes some credit for his election. The RHC declined to talk with us about this race, but in the past, they have told us that they are focused on getting better trade deals between the U.S. and India, which they say provide more jobs for both countries. And they believe illegal immigration into the U.S. is hurting the legal immigration by Indians. And they say Indian Americans more closely align with the Republican Party, both in terms of social conservatism and fiscal conservatism. And they say President Trump embodies all those ideals with his policies. But while they proudly wear their support for Trump, Representative Krishnamurthy hangs that support around them like a dead weight, particularly on the topic of H-1B visas. The Trump administration has proposed cutting extensions on H-1B visas, which could force as many as 500,000 predominantly skilled Indian workers to leave the U.S. while they wait for their green cards.
The president wants to send them home. It hurt all of us, whether you were from India or whether you were born here. And so that's absolutely the wrong way to go. And I can't understand how any Indian American would ever vote for that policy, because that's what you vote for when you support this president.
As a physician and successful entrepreneur, I'm running for Congress to bring real-world experience and common sense to D.C.
And then there is Dr. Sapan Shah, who is running for Congress, also as a Republican, but in a different suburban Chicago district, and not affiliated with the RHC. His district has been fairly split in recent years between Republican and Democratic leadership, and he's keeping President Trump a bit at arm's length.
President Trump is the president, and I'm working in the 10th District to be hired by the people of the 10th District to represent their interests.
America has given us so many opportunities we couldn't have imagined anywhere else. I'm not going to be a career politician. I commit to serving no more than 6 years and then moving out of the way for the next citizen legislator. Join me in bringing common sense to Washington.
But Trump is the leader of Shah's Republican Party, and Shah has a quick response for people who ask him about that.
I think it's that type of litmus test approach that's probably not helpful in our politics. I mean, our politics are about trying to come to consensus on things we can agree on.
Shah, who was born in the Chicago area to parents who grew up in Gujarat State, calls himself a moderate on social issues, but a conservative on fiscal issues. He says as Indian Americans have become more successful in American businesses and entrepreneurship in recent years, it's not surprising they've gotten more politically active.
Certainly issues that face businesses that I'm concerned about, issues like taxes that I'm concerned about, are things that Indian Americans are facing every single day because of their penetration in business, because of their penetration professionally.
And which party do average Indian Americans around Chicago support?
I fall, let's say, Democratic mostly.
Some friends are more Republicans.
We found one man who says Indians by nature support the values of the Republican Party. However,
when I got my citizenship, the first party that approached me was Democratic people. Republican, unfortunately, they are nice people, but they never ever approach newcomers and give them the kind of welcome.
If either Jitendra Dignawalkar or Vandana Jingan win the Republican primary in late March, they will face Representative Krishnamurthy in November. And that will mark the first time in American history that two Indian Americans will face each other in a general election for Congress. And regardless of which side they are on, that alone is a big step for Indian Americans in U.S. politics. Andy Roach in Chicago for WION.